Welcome to the Antrim Conservation District's Stewardship Podcast. I'm Mike Meriweather. I'm the forester here at the Conservation District. And with us today is Abdeen Jabara. Abdeen is a lifelong resident of Antrim County. Can you say that? And he probably owns one of the oldest cabins on the Cedar River. Abdeen is one of those people who have quietly had a huge impact on the county relative to conservation. We'll get into some of that in a little bit. Great contributor to conservation projects with the Conservation District's been a great, both financially and with his time, so we appreciate that. Formerly, I guess, a retired attorney from New York City. So that's a little background. We'll get into some more of Abdeen's background. So welcome, Abdeen, to our podcast. And first, I guess, if you could tell us, we want to talk a little bit about your family history here in the county. So I'll let you talk a little bit about that, you know, how they arrived. I know you guys own the hardware in Mansalona, things like that. So,
well, my family was an immigrant family. Both my mother and father emigrated to the United States separately from country, what is now called Lebanon. The time that they came, it was part of the Ottoman Empire. Lebanon had not been created. Lebanon was created in the 1940s out of the area of the Ottoman Empire. My mother came as a child, at 3 years old. Her father had homesteaded in North Dakota, and she went there, and he had a farm there. He had 160 acres, and there were 6 children in the family. My mother was the oldest, and all they did was work, and they lived a very impoverished existence. My father, on the other hand, came here in 1909. Actually, both of them came in 1909. My mother to North Dakota and my father to northern Michigan, where there were other people from his village in Lebanon who were working in Boyne City, largely on the railroad. But my father worked there for a while in a tanning factory. They all lived in a rooming house up there. The woman who ran the rooming house, her last name was Schoolcraft, which is a famous name here in Michigan. And my father got injured in that tanning factory. Vat of acid went down the boot that he was wearing, and he got injured and had to recover from that in that rooming house. And it was there that he basically learned to read and write English. Mrs. Schoolcraft taught him.
why did they leave Lebanon, if I could ask?
Well, I'll tell you why they left. Number one, they all were peasants in Lebanon. They lived in these small communities, and all they did was eke out a living out of the soil and orchards that they had. There was no really much of a formal school system, so they really didn't get much formal education. And one of the big reasons was that the Ottoman Empire was engaged in a lot of wars in Europe, and they were coming and conscripting people, young men, in these villages. And some of the men fled, some of them, ran away from the army, etc. I'm not sure that that was the reason my father came. I think it was basically for economic reasons. And what they would do is they would mortgage a little plot of land and get a few Turkish gold pieces to so that they could come on the boat to Marseille in France, and then from Marseille they would go get another boat to New York and land here. It was not, they were pioneers, basically. And my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, he originally landed in Mexico, he and his brother, and they drove a team of horses all the way from Mexico up to North Dakota. So they had a long history here, and my father became a fairly prominent member of Mancelona's community. He was on the bank board. He and my brothers and sisters were all active in the Masonic Temple in Mancelona. I never was. I never joined that, but they were all. And I remember many a potluck dinner there at that Masonic Temple Hall, which had been a church, and my father helped to acquire it for the Masons.
So you went to school in Mancelona.
I went to school in Mancelona. I graduated in 1958, and I actually just recently to one person I graduated with in Mancelona had written me. She read my name in the Mancelona paper about something, and she contacted me, and I met with her and her sister at the Hen's Den in Antrim, that restaurant, and we chatted a bit, and I'm going to meet with her again because I didn't remember the names of all the people we graduated with, and she has a complete list of those. I think we had one 50th graduation celebration at Shanty Creek, and I think most of the people that I graduated with have gone on to greener pastures, as they say. Anyway, I've had what I consider a fairly interesting life because I got involved in so many different things in my practice of law. I went to law school. I first went to undergraduate school at the University of Michigan, and I majored in pre-legal studies, after which I really didn't know what I was going to do. I was just kind of floundering around. And one of my brothers said, Abdeen, get a profession. They won't be able to take it away from you. And I don't know who the they were, but I took his advice and I went to law school. I got out of law school. I was studying for the bar that summer and also taking a foreign language course at the University of Michigan, a summer course. Totally exhausted at the end of the summer, and I took off and spent a year abroad, and then I came back and I opened my office in Detroit just before the Detroit uprising, and I experienced that. I had worked, one of the fortunate things that happened to me was that during law school, I worked for one of the law firms, one of the large law firms in downtown Detroit that handles personal injury cases, and I more or less learned how to handle that type of case. So when I opened my office, I didn't specialize. I basically would take anything that would walk in the door because I had to make a living. But it was a struggle, but it was an interesting time in Detroit because it was a time of great transition in the city. When I was in law school, there were only 4 women in the class, no African Americans, and which was in a city of 30% African American population. It was also a time of the civil rights struggle in the South, where some lawyers were going down to help people in the civil rights struggle. A lot of people in the office that I was working in were connected with that. It was also a time of the anti-war movement. The Vietnam War was raging, and I was fodder for the military, but in any case, I practiced in Detroit for 20 years, took a job in Washington, D.C., which I had for 4 years, came back to Michigan because I had acquired this cottage that I have on Cedar River in 1984 from my two brothers who had bought it in 1964. And they really didn't do much to the cottage. It was basically a hunting camp. It was a total of 120 acres in Kearney Township with a mile of river frontage on the Cedar River and this marvelous old railroad grade of the East Jordan and Southern Railroad that ran between East Jordan and Belair.
That wasn't still functioning, was it?
It functioned until 1961. It ran until 1961, and then it was just a tourist train where the fake outlaws would raid it and so forth. And then it ended. And now that the engine for that is now in a park in East Jordan. It's yes, and people should go over there and look at it because that was basically a logging train. It was, and it had several stops between Belair and East Jordan. Chestonia was one of them. And I still remember seeing that train out there, I would have been 21 when it stopped running. So I acquired that property with my uncle from my two brothers. And I started to upgrade it. There was shaggy green carpeting and horrible siding on the walls. I opened it up. I added a room to it. Those types of things. And it became actually a very, very important refuge for me. One, because I came there because it had a huge stone fireplace, lovely stone fireplace. And I loved to build these fires in the fall and sit there in front of the fire and think about great thoughts. So, I think it was after, and in fact, I'm quite sure it was after I came back from Washington. And I spent 3 years there at that cottage, that I was approached by the county and the Grand Traverse Regional Land Conservancy about the possibility of donating part of it to the county under a program that they had where the donor would contribute 25% of the value of the property, and the county and the Regional Land Conservancy would pay 3/4 of the value.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the Cedar River for a minute, because you have some history there in terms of conservation stuff. So, yeah, I know we'll go through some of that. So, just for the people that are listening, the Cedar River is part of the Elk River chain, and it contributes, and it's the largest tributary of the Elk River chain. I think it's probably 25% of the water that goes into the Elk River, which is Lake Belair, Clam Lake, Torch Lake, Elk Lake, eventually out to Elk Rapids. So I think it's over 25% of the flow that goes into those lakes from the Cedar River. So it's a huge part of the watershed. I don't think people sometimes realize that a lot of the stable cold water comes from the Cedar River, goes into, Torch Lake, for example. So in 1997, I had to look this stuff up this morning, but Shanty Creek applied for some environmental permits to build a golf course, and they also the second permit was, and you have to correct me if I'm wrong because you know this better than I do, was for pumping water out of the river for snowmaking mainly, but also irrigation. And the permit allowed for up to 3,000 gallons per minute to come out of the Cedar River, which is 15 to 20% of the flow. So it was a huge draw from the river. And the other thing they wanted to do was cross the river with a golf course and use the river as a hazard, basically. So those are the two permits, and they were actually granted. The two permits were granted by the DEQ. So you were instrumental in initiating 2 lawsuits, is that correct? And forming the Friends of the Cedar. So you can elaborate on that if you would.
I'd first like to just say one thing, and then we'll move into that lawsuit and what happened there. I feel somewhat in the position of a steward for that river. And I had a huge problem way before this lawsuit with erosion, bank erosion from the current of the river, which was having a great impact, number one, on the fishery in the river because of the soil that would go into the river. And also, I was losing land.
Yeah, I remember
year.
that. Yeah.
And thank God for the conservation office, because
That was Warren Studley, right?
Warren Studley came in, and we brought in 800 ton of rock riprap to put in there, and that was a hell of a job to put that down in there, because all that land is very soft because of the high water table. But we brought it in and put it in there, and we put some fish houses in the river there at that time. And that was my first engagement, if you will, with trying to preserve and maintain the Cedar River in its natural form for people to enjoy.
Yeah.
Now, when we come to this whole business about the Friends of the Cedar River, the real driving force behind that was Russ Blaisdell. Russ was head of the conservation club here. He used to meet in this particular facility, and he was one wonderful human being. He was active with the trout, fisheries for the children up at
Fish Day, yeah.
Yeah, Fish Day.
They still have that, yeah.
And he was really involved in all this conservation issues in the county. So there were two things that I was concerned about. Number one was the forestry in the county. And number two was retaining these natural rivers that are the lifeblood of the county. So Russ Blaisdell, I don't know whether he came to me or we just got to talking and so forth, and I was pretty outraged about this plan by Shanty Creek to take this water out without any regulation. And so I am proud to say that I put up the first $1,000 for hiring an attorney. We hired this attorney, an environmental attorney, a wonderful attorney in Traverse City. And we went to circuit court on it. And we had quite a long proceeding about this designs of the Shanty Creek on the Cedar River. One thing we had to show that it was that the riparian owners had some legal rights with regard to that. And in order to do that, we had to show that it was an actually navigable river. And we got somebody with a kayak who started up at the headwaters and actually made it down to Lake Belair with that kayak.
Oh.
I think he did a little portaging.
I'm sure he did. There's a lot of wood in the river.
But that was one of the things that we did in this lawsuit, and I think the judge that we had was Judge Power, and he was very judicious, and I was the lead plaintiff in that. I was not the only plaintiff, but I was the lead plaintiff, and out of that came this building up of this Friends of the Cedar. It was kind of galvanized around this lawsuit. And there were two types of people, basically, that were involved in this Friends of the Cedar. One were the fishermen that were interested in preserving it as a fishery. And people like myself, I'm not much of a fisherman. But I do love the natural beauty of the cedar. And in fact, I and my brothers and sisters from our childhood used to actually walk out to part of the headwaters of the Cedar River and go in with waders to cut the wild watercress that grows on the river. And that was a huge, huge family deal. We loved that watercress. And we still go get it. And and it's almost magical back in there at that point because the cedars are arching over the river and the light is dappled on the water through the branches. And it's just absolutely like a magical place. And that's what I regard the cedar and what it has meant to me. And that is a place of real magic and a comfort that I find away from the maddening crowd, if you will, in New York and Detroit and elsewhere.
So the other thing that happened too, shortly after Shanty Creek was issued permits, was they had a storm event. And I was here then, actually. And I remember going up there after that event, and you could literally put a pickup truck in the ravine that washed into the Cedar River. So one of their fairways they were designing completely washed into the Cedar River. So basically an entire fairway of golf fair ended up in the Cedar River. So that, I don't know how that played into the lawsuit with the pumping of water, but now we had another problem in the Cedar River, which was stream degradation from that storm event. And so I think you were involved in suing Friends of the Cedar sued Shanty Creek for reclamation money, if I remember correctly.
Yes, yes, we did. I remember that event. I don't recall what the outcome of that second lawsuit was.
Well, Shanty Creek was required to pay the conservation district for reclamation. And it was $50,000, I believe, that they were required to put into a reclamation fund. I'm not sure that's the exact amount, but it was somewhere right in that was their fine, or that's what they initially agreed to. And then the conservation district matched that money with some clean water funds and came up with a couple $100,000 to deal with erosion problems, not only on the Cedar, but other creeks in the county as well. So they were held responsible for that. They were fined for violating a soil erosion permit. I think that was a $500 fine, but then the actual lawsuit itself from the Friends of the Cedar who initiated it was, I think, in the $50,000 range was the final settlement.
Well, I do remember that on our first lawsuit, to stop them from extracting the amounts of water that they wanted to extract to make snow and to irrigate their golf courses, the judge ordered the installation of a monitor on the water to monitor and to restrict the amount of water that they could take out of there.
Yeah,
That's what happened.
Yeah,
That
right.
was the result of that lawsuit, and that the second lawsuit, of course, didn't involve the taking of water. It just involved a huge soil erosion issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
And both of those lawsuits were really important because and I just want to say this, Mike, and if you'll forgive me, I can't thank you enough for your stewardship in this county of the streams and the forests in this county, because I've witnessed it firsthand, the amount of work and effort and tireless energy that you put into this.
I appreciate that.
I remember another parcel on the Cedar was going to be donated to the county, just east of my property. And it was, I think, 160 acres or more.
Well, there was two things that happened, and I think all that stuff with the Shanty Creek that you were involved with the lawsuits and stuff, I think it actually stimulated the concept of protecting the Cedar River watershed from development, because I think people started to realize that this watershed that we love so much is under a lot of pressure from development. So I got to give credit to Janet Pearson, who contacted the SCAF property, which was an investment company that owned the 80 acres here. So you were the initial person that donated your property, was 100 and some acres.
115.
115. So you started the Cedar River Natural Area basically with your donation. And then we built on that over the years, and we were able to purchase the 80 acres, which is just east of Craven Pond now. It'll be, I don't know, maybe half a mile of stream on both sides. And we bought that property. I say we, the county agreed to buy that with a loan from the Grand Traverse Conservancy. I can't remember the purchase price. I think it was $90,000 or something for that, if I remember right. But anyway, so that was added to you, that brought it up to your property. And then I think it was 2017 is the 160 acres that you're talking about east of your property. And that was an interesting one because the Boucher family wanted to donate that to us, and actually ended up, the family had some discussions about it, and then they did end up donating that to the Conservation District.
I remember very well that donation because I happened to be up here when these documents were being signed, and you needed a notary public, and I was a notary public. Right. I came and notarized those documents.
So you've been in.
And since that time, I know that there was a big beaver dam up on that Boucher property, and lots of destruction of forestry there because of it. But it now still is protected property, and it's so wonderful that there's this huge area now that is protected, and that your office came out with a little brochure about the Cedar River Natural Area, and you put a little blurb on the back of it from me that said it's a hidden gem in Antrim County. I mean, a lot of people are not aware of its existence.
That's true. It's hard to get around in there, but there are 2 miles of trails in there you can walk. We do have some beaver problems, of course, but collectively the whole property is 240 acres, and 2 branches of the Cedar River, the north and the south branch, are on the Boucher property, and then your property is another half a mile of stream or more, and then the SCAF property another half a mile. So there's 3 miles of stream corridor that we protected. But my thought is that was all generated from that Shanty Creek activity,
right?
Because people supported the acquisition of these properties because they didn't want to see that whole stream corridor turn into a, developed corridor. So,
Well, I think we've, I don't get to spend as much time up here as I would like. But every time I do come up here, I kind of just thank my better angels for having that property. I now still have 5 acres.
yeah.
And with that big barn on it, and that you put a new bridge in over the river. You took out that old
That's
trestle
true. I
bridge.
forgot about that. We did replace
Corey
the timber.
Arsenal.
Corey Arsenal had the Camp Pugsley prisoners.
That's right.
Did that? Yeah.
That's right. I remember that very well, and it's a wonderful bridge over there. It's
Still intact. Yeah.
and now they use that trail in there for skiing and for cross country races, and it's just wonderful. And I'll tell you, one of the things that helped in this whole deal was that Glenn Chown came over one day, and he was brought over by one of the people that was working for the Grand Traverse Regional Land Conservancy, who now I think is in charge of the Little Traverse Land Conservancy.
Glenn's still in Traverse City.
Yeah.
Yep. At the regional.
And we
conservancy.
were walking down that trail, and a hawk flew over. And we looked up at that hawk, and I think that hawk helped see it.
Hopefully.
It was so beautiful, and so it's amazing how much habitat is on that property for how many different kinds of both mammals and reptiles. And I couldn't believe it, and I still don't know what this animal was, and I'm like to get your input on it. I was sitting by the river the other day, and I hear this squawking, and I look over, and there's this, I think was a duck, but it had a pointed bill on it going down the river, and I wondered what kind of a duck was that with a pointed bill.
It was probably a grebe or some sort of shore duck, a smaller duck or smaller bird.
Well, it went by me awfully quick.
Okay.
But so
I don't know.
But if it's shore ducks that have, I know one of the shore ducks hit my neighbor's window and died, and they got a picture of it.
Yeah. I don't know if the shore ducks actually can float in the water like a duck.
Yeah.
They're more of a walking, wading
Well, this
bird.
one quacked like a duck. If
Okay.
it quacks like a duck.
It was probably merganser, would be my guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would be a fish duck.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So that just happened the other day, and I was sitting there, and it was just a thing of beauty for me,
There's a large population of all kinds of animals, everything from bears, otters, of course our favorite animal, the beaver.
Right.
They've been a
They
problem.
love you. They love you tremendously.
We have a love-hate relationship with the beavers. Yeah, they beat me though. I was battling them for a long time, and I finally moved the trail.
You need another job, John Jacob Astor. He built his whole empire. We in New York, we have all these things. John Jacob Astor.
From the fur trade.
From the fur trade up on Mackinac Island.
Yeah.
He had all these voyagers going out and having the natives trap all these animals. And so maybe that's what we need. Another.
We need another hat industry or something. Yeah, but I don't know. They keep coming. There's good and bad with the beaver.
Yeah,
so.
Right. Well, something. It's all part of nature, and we like you said, there's the good and the bad, and thankfully, I had this huge hornet nest. I don't know if I told you.
Mm-mm.
Well, this is about 2 years ago. I was sitting out and sitting in and it was hanging off this a maple tree out there, and these hornets were swarming around it.
Oh, yeah.
And my neighbor, a conservation officer, said, "No, that's a deadly kind of hornet you got there. You don't want to mess with them." And thankfully, he came over during the nighttime and put a bag over it
We're getting.
and transferred the whole nest up to another tree up Burrell Road.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I was flabbergasted that he was able to do that.
I can't believe he wouldn't have just sprayed him with some.
Well, no, he didn't do that.
He
And the
moved them.
next day, we saw a few hornets that had come back because geographically they knew where they had their nest, but they never rebuilt there.
Yeah, you're talking about Jim Gorno.
Yes, I'm talking about Jim Gorno.
Okay.
And but little incidents of things like that helped to make. And then I looked out of my. For the first time, I saw a family of sandhill cranes out in the back. I'd never seen that before. That was the first time.
It's definitely a wildlife refuge. I mean, people can't hunt back there, but
And it's so close to this Belair, and it's like night and day. I can run into Belair and get a loaf of bread and go back out there and sit by the river.
yeah, people do use it.
Yeah.
There's quite a few people use.
I'll tell you a story that just happened this a couple of weeks ago that Jim Gorno told me about. He saw a light on. He saw, this is late at night, very late at night. He saw a light on in my cabin. He said, "Oh, maybe the fellow who takes care of my cabin left the light on or something over there." And then he heard some rustling along the river. And he ran back to his house and put on his uniform and walked down there, and he heard these two voices. And one of them says, "That's a big head on that." And he put his flashlight on. There were two young boys out there fishing, and they had caught a 22-inch long brown trout. And he checked them. They both had licenses, and he told them good fishing, and that was the end of it. But that kind of a story, those young kids going out there late at night fishing for brown trout, just is such a wonderful story. And I've told everybody that comes and wants to fish off the bridge on Burrell Road, I said, go on down, and fish is to your heart's content. Yeah, so it's so nice that we can have this synergy between humans and nature that is symbolized by the Grass River Nature Conservancy, the Cedar River Nature Conservancy, and the Grass River.
Yeah.
Both here in Antrim County.
Yeah, that's true. Those are big areas. So anyway, just wanted to have you come in because you've had a lot of history here and talk about the Cedar River. Is there anything else you want to say about the?
No, I think that covers it. There's. I told you I did. For people who are really interested in my political work, because I was pretty involved politically when I was practicing law, and in Washington D.C., I did do an NPR program, about a 30-minute program. And it's you can find it by online as well. And I talked about.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things. We could spend a couple hours talking about your whole history of your law history and your civil rights history
But I'll tell you something. The foundation for all of this is growing up in Mansalona and going to school in Mansalona and having the friends that we had, the wonderful, wonderful community that we had in Mansalona growing up.
Yeah.
Because it was totally different than it is today. We had our own newspaper, 8 pages that would come out. I
So
think
you got a newspaper there. What is?
a weekly basis, 1961 Mansalona Herald.
You could hold that
And
that
on-
way if you want and hold it up to the
And on
camera.
the front cover is the story about my father's death in an automobile accident in front of the drive-in theater in Acme.
Oh.
And I was with him when
Oh, no
that
kidding.
happened, and I was pretty badly injured.
Wow.
And that experience and the care and the love that I got in Manslona, then both from my family and from the larger community, helped make me into the person that I am.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming in. I know you're on a short time frame. You got to go back to New York.
Going back tomorrow. Going back tomorrow.
So I'm glad I caught you. I mean,
Well,
kind of a
you
spur
wouldn't
of
have
the
caught
moment
me.
thing, but
You wouldn't have caught me if I didn't drive all the way over there to
Oh.
the Church Lake.
at
That was great.
seminar
about
the other day.
That
Yeah.
talk you gave about the oak wilt. I mean, I had never heard of it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a
Yeah.
whole nother podcast we could do. But
Yeah, good.
So,
Well,
all right.
thank you so much for the invitation.
I appreciate it. Is that, how long was that?
22 minutes.
That's perfect. Yeah. Good.
Great.